This video was made possible by EA Game Changers. Hey guys, how you going? This is BillyEatWorld again, and in today's Real History episode, we're going to take a look at the origins of the British Special Boat Section. And that's because, as you might have heard in the last week or so, one of the new war stories coming in Battlefield 5 is called Under No Flag, and it focuses on this very topic. Now, chances are, unless you're a history buff, you probably haven't heard of the SBS, but you might have heard of their sister unit, the SAS. And so in today's video, we're going to take a look at their origin story as well, because both of these groups started around the same time, and as you'll see, in very similar circumstances. Okay, so to kick off, the story of the Special Boat Section starts in 1940, just after the British were forced to withdraw from France in the Dunkirk evacuation. And so just to give you some context, well, at the time, the British didn't really have any organised military presence in continental Europe at all. And this was obviously pretty demoralising, and so Winston Churchill felt like they needed to make an effort to strike back. And as they weren't really in a position to launch a full-scale invasion, the best way to do this was through small raids using guerrilla tactics. Churchill called for, quote, specially trained troops of the hunter class who can develop a reign of terror down these coasts, first of all on the butcher and bolt policy. And so the call for recruits with unique skills and the ability to think independently went out to form a new type of unit known as the British Commandos. The kind of skills I'm talking about weren't always reputable ones, and so the Commandos drew from all different backgrounds, including criminal ones. But what this meant is that far more than a standard infantry unit, the Commandos were able to perform a much wider range of specialised roles. Now, as for the Special Boat Section specifically, well, their story starts off with an enthusiastic commando officer by the name of Roger Courtenay, because after spending some time in Africa, Courtenay, a keen canoeist, was convinced of their potential for use in amphibious operations. And in 1940, while he was a commando recruit, he tried to convince the British Admiralty that a unit could be formed around small folding canoes called foalboats. But at the time, the British Navy denied his request because they felt that there was no way that small boats could be effective in rough open seas. Like I said, Courtenay was pretty enthusiastic and he wasn't someone that took no for an answer, so what he did to convince them was pretty crazy. He actually paddled out to the HMS Glengyle anchored in the River Clyde in Scotland, and he climbed aboard and stole a deck gun cover. He then paddled back and gave the cover to a group of Navy officers that were having a drink at a hotel in the nearby town. And lucky for Courtenay, rather than locking him up, they actually saw the merit in what he'd done. They promoted him to captain and gave him command of 12 men, which went on to become the original Special Boat Section. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the sister unit of the SBS, founded around the same time, is the SAS, or Special Air Service. And once again, their story starts with the actions of yet another ambitious commando officer, this time a guy called David Stirling. Stirling was at the time attached to No. 8 Commando in the Middle East, which had suffered heavy casualties during the battles of Crete and Litany River. And it was at this time that he had the idea that maybe it would be a better idea for commandos to use vehicles to quickly strike multiple targets in the desert using the cover of night. Just like Roger Courtenay, Stirling knew this idea would likely fall on deaf ears, and so he knew he'd have to take drastic measures. And so rather than sending the idea up through the chain of command, he actually, on crutches mind you, managed to infiltrate the British headquarters in Cairo. He was spotted by the guards, but he managed to slip into the office of the then Deputy Chief of Staff, General Ritchie. And so even though it must have been pretty suspicious how he got there, somehow he did manage to convince Ritchie, who went on to convince the British Commander-in-Chief, Claude Auchinleck, to form the unit. Now, the reason I bring both of these units up together is because still to this day they have a very close relationship. Because even though the SBS is an amphibious unit and the SAS is an airborne unit, once on the ground they carry out very similar roles. Like Churchill initially called for, one of their primary missions is to butcher and bolt. In other words, do as much damage to the enemy without being caught. And that meant they often served in the same operations alongside each other and with other similar commando units like the Long Range Desert Group. By 1943, though, the structure of both units had changed dramatically, and they now comprised of multiple regiments. But most importantly, there was a change in leadership, not least of which because David Stirling himself was captured by the Germans in North Africa. Not just that, but due to combat losses and a number of other factors, parts of both units were reorganised into other elements. Like, for example, number 1 SBS reorganised into what was called the Special Boat Squadron, and number 1 SAS joined with members of the SBS to form the Special Raiding Squadron. Now, to bring you up to speed with where these units are now, without getting into the boring specifics, basically in the mid to late 40s after the war, like many other commando units, both units were reorganised again. And in a nutshell, they both went on to serve in engagements like the Korean and the Falklands Wars, but in various forms and under various names. This reorganisation bounced around until about 1987, when they were both placed under the command of the new United Kingdom Special Forces Directorate. And this is where they remain to this day, with the SAS currently fielding a strength of 3 regiments and the SBS 1 regiment. One thing that is worth mentioning, though, is that both of these modern units are considered to be Tier 1 Special Operations units, which basically means they handle the most sensitive and dangerous missions given to them by the British government. And not just that, what that means is that the identities of the operators serving in these units is highly classified, which means if you do find photos of these units, you'll see their faces are blurred out. Apart from that, though, their current role does have a lot of similarities with their original role in World War II, but most importantly now they specialise in long-range reconnaissance. And of course, in the spirit of the original commandos, they're still highly adept at direct action missions. In other words, sabotage and just generally wreaking havoc deep behind enemy lines. But anyway, guys, that just about wraps up this video, so make sure you let me know what you think of the SAS and the SBS in the comments section below. And also, as you've probably noticed, I'm making a lot more of these real history episodes now, so if you've got an idea for a history topic you'd like to see in a future video, let me know that down below as well. As always, though, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and please feel free to check out the links in the description if you want to see any more of these videos. And also don't forget you can find my Twitter and Discord links down there as well if you want to keep in touch. And as always, until next time, see you later and have a good one.